Hi there, my name's Jake. Welcome to another vlog from me. It's been a while since the last one. I apologize. I have been busy. Yeah, so I basically quit my day job and I started my own film company. So I'm doing media and content for a whole bunch of different people, as well as myself. I have time to work on my photo book, which is great because I've been wanting to actually work on my photo book. And I've got the first draft looked at, and basically I've got it, and yeah, to the next stage. And now I'm going to be working on drafting it. I'll probably do one more revision of it, and hopefully that's it. And then I can actually print the book and give it out to people, and people can hopefully buy the book. But here I am. I'm going to be talking about the next part of the story. So the next part of the story is actually Somalia. So the first time I went to Somalia, and what did I think? And basically my close call to death. So yeah, basically I was living in Afghanistan. So to recap it, I was living in Afghanistan. Had my own film company. I was called Development Pictures. We were making movies and films, and we were working for NGOs and making money. It was great money. And we kept meeting all these other journalists, and journalists needed obviously camera operators, and people to shoot photos for them, and video, mainly video. Most people, especially journalists, they didn't know how to do video themselves, so they kind of needed us to do it. So me and Sam French, I don't know if I spoke about him in the last vlog, but he and I would go and shoot news stories. And so I was working with this one person. Her name was Nemera Bagia. She is now the CNN reporter for Africa, I think, or she might actually be upgraded now to an even higher position. But I was working with her. She was married to a guy who worked in the political section for the British Embassy. She couldn't stay originally at the British Embassy because they had rules and regulations. And so she came to live with us, and we were doing all these short stories, and lo and behold, the British Embassy made an exception, and she could stay at the British Embassy with her husband. So that was kind of crap for a short time, but we made all these cool stories in Afghanistan. We made the story for ICRC, which I think I talked about, and we thought about the next place that we could go to, and she had some links to people in Somalia, in Mogadishu, more particularly. And Mogadishu was probably the most craziest place I could probably ever go to, or that I'd ever really heard about. It was kind of lawless. I think the government had less than 20% control at the time of the city. Al-Shabaab, the militant group at the time, they had full control pretty much of the city and most of the checkpoints. So it was difficult to go in or out of anywhere, but we figured that it was big money for stories there. So we decided to book tickets to this, and that was an effort in itself. And it ended up being a whole bunch of different flights to get there. So we had to go to Dubai from Kabul, Kabul to Dubai, Dubai to Djibouti, Djibouti to, I think, maybe Hargeisa or Somaliland. And then from Somaliland, Hargeisa, we went all the way to Mogadishu. And we went from a really nice plane to a really shit plane. And now we were on these Russian Anatovs, and the Russian Anatovs that we were probably made in the 50s or 60s. They were so crapped out, and none of the seats seemed to work. But they sort of liked us, and they gave us the VIP seatings, which were in the far back, but the seats were broken, so they kind of just went all the way back. And I just remember I was like, fuck, this is so swelteringly hot, humid. Somalia is just the most humidest sort of country I think I've ever been to. But absolutely kind of stunning, sort of right in. But yeah, one thing I forgot to mention was I went to go take a crap on the Anatov, and I remember when I did the crap and I pressed the button and the toilet in the aeroplane, and it just opened up, and so it just went out into the open, and I was like, fuck. Literally, if someone was underneath, that would not be a very pleasant surprise. But I assume that because of the velocity and stuff, it would sort of dissipate and shrivel away into nothing. than some sort of massive torpedo dropping down on somebody. Uh, that was crazy. And then we get to Mogadishu, and Mogadishu airport is just insane with like just people all over the place. No one really trusts us. They gave us these stamps to sort of check in. We had this paperwork that we had to fill out, and in the paperwork it said, "Please register your gun." It's in the paperwork, and that was just like in itself is like, yeah, I don't have a gun. We're journalists. So that was, yeah, I had to leave that one gap, and they kind of looked at you and was like, "You sure you don't have one?" And it's like, "No, man, we can't." And yeah, it's basically we were taken to a hotel that was close by. There wasn't much food in the sort of sense of food, but the fruit was amazingly good. It was amazingly tasty and delicious. That one thing I do remember of Mogadishu. There was not much at that particular time, much food that was sort of coming in, or types of food. The hotel that we stayed in, now apparently some Al Qaeda sort of, yeah, guys from Saudi Arabia had stayed there, and police had sort of like ram raided one of the rooms and obviously taken them. I don't know if it was police or special forces or something, but yeah, there was, yeah, you could see that these doors had been ram raided in. So it was kind of like, a lot of suspicion of why you'd want to go to this place. There was really expensive hotels you could stay at, but we were kind of on a budget, so we stayed at this hotel. And they kind of looked at me and they was just like, "Oh, well, yeah, you're kind of like a white guy, so you're probably okay. You don't speak Arabic, so yeah, you're obviously, not going to really fit in so well." And absolutely right. I was not going to fit in well. And me and Nema, we did these stories. We hit up the hospital. We hit stories on famine. We were in these like crazy little cars, sort of driving around. It's so sweltering hot, and we're trying to do these stories on the front line. I remember we did something like 20 takes on this one front line where there was Al Shabaab. And at the last take, I think we finally get it, and Nema doesn't stuff up what she wanted to say, and then there was gunfire. And yeah, we quickly made it to cover. We interviewed somebody, and I remember there was gunfire in the background, and you could hear it, and then suddenly it got really close. And then the guy that we're interviewing is like, "Oh, we should go back inside the hotel and under the locked doors, because yeah, they're probably about 50 meters away around the corner." And so we did. Al-Shabaab really did have most of the city. There was really only the main road we could actually drive on, and that was, yeah, literally insane by itself. And we got to go to Via Roma, and at Via Roma, that's the old Italian sort of part of the city. There's an old cathedral. So the Al-Shabaab, they had dug up dead bodies from the cathedral, Christian bodies, Catholic bodies, and the Vatican had paid for those bodies to be exhumed and delivered to them so they could get a proper burial. So they paid some ransom for Catholic skeletons. That's kind of insane. But yeah, the whole place we needed guards to look after us, and they would enforce us to hire probably you'd get about 10 guards to look after us. And they'd all mash up in one vehicle pretty much that was driving along us. And it was crazy. And it was a pretty incredible journey. There was like a military parade happening. I don't think that was for us, but we kind of heard about it and we turned up and we filmed it. And they filmed some operations and stuff showing what the military could do. We met most interesting people. Down at the fish market, they catch great white shark. And we went to a restaurant where they actually serve great white shark as part of the menu. It's absolutely sort of really fatty, sort of fat for the outside part, which kind of, when grilled, is really amazingly tasty. It's almost like eating, yeah, like a good like lamb chop, or yeah, a gigantic fat amount of like beef with steak. But it was more like lamb chop, really. And that was, yeah, most tastiest meal I probably had there. One of the things that happened to us is that we went to the US Embassy in Mogadishu. Now, no one had really ever been able to get there. And it was actually an orphanage. So these kids were living in there when we went and visited, and we shot all this footage. It was in Via Roma area. And it was crazy because this orphanage had no money whatsoever, but there was something like 20, 30 kids just like living in this yeah, like disposed shack. Yeah, the embassy and was totally bombed out. Everything was looted, and these kids just live there. I remember having to cook our meals. Nema had organized some interviews with, I guess, I don't think they were Al Qaeda members, but they were members of another Islamist group that was not Al Shabaab, because Al Shabaab did not want to talk to us. And they did not trust me coming along. They figured that she wasn't smart enough to know the directions, and they were figuring about putting me into the boot of the car and driving me around. And in the end, they wanted her to just go by herself. I didn't really trust that idea, but I just basically had to teach her how to use a camera, how to set it up on a tripod, and shoot what was happening. And that was crazy. And we got 5 or 6 different stories in that one week, and it was insane. And we ran out of money. And so this is another little story. So we ran out of money, and her husband didn't want to send us money. So I end up having to get my parents to send me money, and they had to send it through Hawala. And Hawala system is this sort of system where people send money through families. So they send money through, you go to like a cafe or something that might be in Australia, and that family member will know another family member that has like a money shop in Somalia, and you send the money to this person, and that person will call up their relative in Mogadishu and say, I've got this money, we'll trade. And then they'll trade that money over to you, and that's how I end up having to get money sent to us so we could actually buy tickets to go home, which was crazy enough in itself. But we didn't end up going home. We went straight to the UK, to London, and we had done a really good run with Channel 4, but it was a great opportunity for Nema to try and make her break with CNN. So CNN was offering a lot of money for the footage that we had taken and done, and stories that we had done in Somalia. I think Channel 4 was pretty upset, but it was kind of a step up for her career. But I saw all the money that we had, and I figured I was going to go on another trip. This time I was actually going to go by myself, and we'd made some contacts, and I figured if I do these stories, I will get paid bank. I could probably set myself as a good camera operator, photojournalist in the region. And so the first job in my first few days, I had organized to be with an ambulance called Lifeline. The guys were really nice. The driver that I was with, he was amazingly nice guy, and the medic that I was with. And so Lifeline was this Somali sort of like private sort of business that picked up the wounded people that was being wounded during the conflict and civil unrest with Al Shabaab. Lifeline had the ability to go past the front lines and pick up people, and they really wanted to show how good of a service that they were doing in Somalia. And so I was with them, and I put this story as the most scariest time that I've ever had in my life, and the time that I actually felt the most that I was probably going to die. And we were riding through a checkpoint, and there was an Al-Shabaab checkpoint, and I think these kids just decided that they were kind of calling for us to stop, but then one kid decided that they were going to just start shooting. And so they started shooting at the ambulance, and they shot through the front window. It killed the medic and it killed the driver, and we went slamming into the side of the road. I can't remember what we slammed into, but all I remember was my face I got thrown into the front of the car, into the window, and then all the way back, and I was knocked out solid, and I was covered in so much blood from the people that I was with, and I laid there pretty much unconscious, but I was slowly waking up, but I could hear the guys, Al-Shabaab, basically looting our ambulance and vehicle, and I just remained dead for that moment, or looked like I was dying. And they took my camera, they took all my gear that I had with me, and they all fled, like laughing, and you could hear them running away with their loot. And I basically woke up to this nightmare, and I had to go and take the driver out of the seat, and I put him into the back, and I took over his spot. And I had to drive, I figured, to the hospital, the safest place. My problem was I didn't know where to go because I wasn't paying attention. I was filming and I was taking photos from inside the vehicle. So I had no idea really how to get to the hospital. I'd been to the hospital before, and I'm definitely sure if I came to familiar sort of places, I would, I would find out and get to safety. And I was shit scared. I still think about it, like the fear that runs through my body. Just like, you lose the ability to be able to drive properly, to be able to think properly. I was mainly thinking that I was going to run into them again and they would kill me. And I kept driving through, and lucky enough, I get to a government checkpoint. And this government checkpoint, I was like literally kind of terrified because, I just assumed that was all Al-Shabaab. I really wanted to drive through it, and I just kind of accepted that I was going to, I would die no matter what. So I stopped at that checkpoint, and the guy came out to me, he started yelling at me in Arabic. I have no idea what the hell he was saying. I kind of just set out the hospital, and the guy sort of mentioned to where I needed to go, and so he took me to the hospital, and I got there safely. I get to the hospital, and I stop the car, and I get out, and I cry, and I fucking cry, and I think to myself, I am a dickhead. Like, I literally went there by myself. I didn't go with anyone. I didn't tell anyone, because I didn't want Nema to be angry at me that I went without her. And I wanted to make money. And yeah, I stopped for a moment, and I had enough money to go home, so I went home to Dubai first, and I bought myself a new camera, and then I went pretty much straight back to Kabul because that was my home, and it was really hard to process it. I guess things don't just happen to you, they happen for you. And it happened for me to be able to understand the consequences of what I do for my job. I kept on obviously continuing on as a war photographer, but I finally understood what total loss was. And I really value life from then on. Just living. I didn't know what to do myself. I had skater stand, I had teaching kids skateboarding, but I was just mentally not really able to cope well. Yeah, I kept seeing in my mind's eye this image of dying, and I was kind of lucky where I had another friend called Leo who I'd met. He was getting into filmmaking, and he wanted to make a film in the United States and Mexico. This film was called Larryland. And so I said yes. I said yes to it. It wasn't going to pay well. I think Leo had enough money to buy me a camera and help look after my stay. And I agreed to that. I agreed to a new lens because that's what I needed. I just got myself a camera. I had one shitty 50mm lens. That's all I had. And I needed to make my career again. I started from scratch. And yeah, I went and took that job on, and I went to America, and that's going to be in the next episode.